Welcome to another episode of Fault Lines. I'm Gauri Dwivedi. This week we get you 3 war zones, 3 conflicts decoded right here, starting with what's happening in the Pacific. The Japanese-Chinese fault line has always been one that has tested governments, and it looks like that there could be a potential conflict that is simmering right now. We get you details on that. Next up, we tell you more about what's happening in Syria. It's been 1 year since the Bashar al-Assad government was overthrown. How is Syria now coping up with the many fault lines that exist there? We tell you that. And lastly, the Thailand-Cambodia conflict. It seemed that Donald Trump is going to get a Nobel Peace Prize for it because he's ensured everything is working out fine. That isn't the case. One flare-up and things were almost back to where they were 6 months back. We get you details on that as well. Our top story this week on fault lines, an old rivalry that is sparking an entirely new flashpoint. The Japan-China-Taiwan conflict is in fact a fault line where all 3 of them are locked in a hard-edged standoff across the Pacific. And the fault line, well, it is only defining and it's only widening as we speak. A Chinese radar lock-on against Japanese fighters that took place in Okinawa. Okinawa is the place where there's been a large American presence since Second World War. The most serious run-in in more than a decade has set off alarm bells all the way from Tokyo to Washington. As I said, Okinawa is very important for the Americans as well. US officials are backing Japan. It's a treaty ally, a treaty partner. They need to back it. And Beijing's drills are getting more louder by the day. And as we get you this broadcast, viewers, missile batteries are rising on Japan's frontier islands. And China's rehearsing beach landings that could, well, some say dwarf even D-Day. But will it actually come till then? Will the balance of power in Asia actually shift so far ahead? And what is the Trump administration going to do about that? First and foremost, let's get you up to speed with what's really happening in the Pacific as we speak. So what really has happened so far? Let's break that down for you. First and foremost, Chinese jets lock Japanese radars. Now, what does this mean? This means that when you are facing adversary and their weapon system, if you are able to lock it in, it means they are in your firing range. And that's when things suddenly snowballed into something far serious than what that entire region has seen in over a decade. America backed Japan publicly. It is a treaty partner. It's an ally partner. It needs to back it. And they did so in so many words. But how did it get now even more intense? That's when the Russian bombers also came in. The Russia-China bombers, when they performed flybys, that is when it suddenly looked like the Russian-Chinese bonhomie that Western security analysts have been talking about for so long almost seemed to come true in the Pacific. Japan, meanwhile, has fortified the Yonaguni line, which means that it is now escalating and it's actually upping the ante, even as Taiwan is tracking these PLA sorties. Now, where does Taiwan fit into this mix? We're going to tell you more on that because Taiwan is actually just 100 kilometers away from Japanese territory. So when China says it wants to take over Taiwan, it has direct impact on Japan as well, even as carrier drills are intensifying. Now, you can see this is where all action is and heat is actually intensifying in that region. Now, so you see clearly, as the Pacific heats up, the world's major powers are now moving pieces like it's actually a chessboard built on fault lines. Meanwhile, take a look at this report that details how a Taiwan flashpoint could play out both on land, sea, and even in the air, ignite a conflict at an unprecedented scale that the world has been trying to avoid for long.
In the skies east of Okinawa, the diplomatic temperature has dropped. Japanese F-15 pilots claim that Chinese J-15s twice locked fire control radars on them. It's an act military officers call one button short of a missile. Tokyo calls it the most dangerous encounter in years. Beijing, on the other hand, insists Japan provoked it. But the radar flare-up lit something bigger. Across the Ryukyu chain, Japan is hardening its islands. It's rolling out long-range missiles, electronic warfare units and radar grids from Kyushu to Yonaguni, just 110 kilometers off Taiwan. Japan is converting its postcard paradise into a frontline fortress. As for China, well, it's moving in formation. Carrier Liaoning launched roughly 100 jet sorties in a single day. Russia and Chinese nuclear-capable bombers soared past Japan in a coordinated show of force. At sea, new satellite imagery shows civilian roll-on roll-off ships, China's lesser-known shadow navy. It's practicing beach offloads of armored vehicles, the very same logistics needed for a Taiwan landing. Military planners say a Taiwan conflict might unfold in 3 violent beats: missile barrages, amphibious crossings, then a ground thrust for Taipei. US war games warn Beijing could try to seize ports quickly, because without ports, no invasion can survive. Taiwan, for its part, vows to sink ships before they reach shore. The Pacific has seen storms before, but these winds feel different. If a Taiwan crisis erupts, it could reshape this entire century. An NDTV World report.
All right, let's get an important voice on fault line. Sana Hashmi is a fellow of Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. She studied in Taiwan. She's joining us from there. She's tracked this space closely. Sana, how is it looking like right now? There's been a lot of flashpoints of late. Is it looking like it could escalate further?
Thank you, Gauri. It is one of the most contested issues, specifically since 2020, since the start of the pandemic and when Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. But of course, now when Sanai Takachi is at the helm in Japan, it was very much expected that how China is going to perceive this change in leadership. She's considered to be the protege of Shinzo Abe, and we all know that how Shinzo Abe's approach towards Taiwan and towards the regional security was. And I think she is definitely carrying forward what was left behind by Shinzo Abe. So I think China already had this idea that this is not going to be an easy task to get Japan away from Taiwan. So it is definitely getting much more contested, much more polarized. And also China is not really leaving this particular incident behind, as in it was just a statement that she said it in Diet. And I think this is something that we have been hearing for a very, very long time. Shinzo Abe said it, and the successive leaders have been saying it, that how a Taiwanese contingency could also be a Japanese.
Which brings me to ask you that, while there are deep military aspects to it, a lot of this conflict is actually political in nature. And now that there's been such a transition in terms of Japanese political view, Japanese political leadership, that do you think is central to how this is likely to play out going forward?
Absolutely. As in, of course, we have to keep in mind that Taiwan is at the core of this entire episode. China is just not taking it any further, that if you're talking about Taiwan, you just have to stop it there. As in, this has become such a huge red line for China. So, of course, this has been a political issue. China and Japan have their own territorial disputes, and now with Taiwan. So from Chinese perspective, the entire idea is that if China is going to invade Taiwan, Japan, along with the US, is going to be a part of that conflict. But I think what China is not really understanding, or maybe they understand it's just a part of the play, that this is also about Japanese security. I think for Japan, Taiwan is, of course, a primary security concern, because if something happens in Taiwan, near Taiwan, because of the close proximity, it is also going to be a security issue for Japan. And it's primarily because whatever missile, whatever attack China is going to go for Taiwan. It is also might just
All right.
reach Japanese territory, which we have also seen during the Nancy Pelosi visit. And I think this was the start point where Japan also
That's when the
became much
flashpoint really
more
intensified, when Nancy Pelosi went there and she challenged the Chinese leadership, looked them in the eye. But since then, a lot has moved, both in terms of the US-China relationship and also China's position. But I want to understand, and this very quickly, walk us through how the Chinese view the present conflict. Are they willing to escalate this? Or do you think that this is just a flashpoint that is likely to subside over the course of the next couple of weeks?
It's very hard to say if there's going to be an escalation or if this tension is going to be escalated into a full-fledged conflict. I don't really see a possibility of it. What China has been trying to do in the past few years with Japan, with Taiwan, is to change the status quo and also establishing new norm. And this militarization, these tensions, this war of word is something that is a part of this entire new norm process. So as of now, I don't really see that this is going to be turning into a conflict, but I think we have to just brace ourselves for a situation where there is intensified militarization and maybe a standoff. But I think South China Sea, East China Sea, this might spill over to other theaters as well. But I think Taiwan would be the primary theater of conflict, and it would definitely involve Japan. And I think this is one of the evidences that how Japan could be involved in a Taiwan contingency.
Very quickly, you are in Taipei. What's the mood like? The political leadership's view in Taiwan about these present flashpoints that are something that the world is witnessing and really tracking very closely.
I think the threat is taken much more seriously than ever before, and also because China is also ramping up their efforts and militarization and everything. So I think this is being deeply felt within the leadership. The defense expenditure, they're talking about increasing the defense expenditure as well. But they're very grateful for the Japanese support. And I feel that US, of course, is by it's a de facto security guarantor for Taiwan. But there is a sense of gratitude towards Japan as well. But there's much more focus on self-sufficiency for now in Taiwan.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. Sana Hashmi joining us from Taipei for that quick perspective on how things look like right now. Viewers, well, this is the Blinkers Off segment on the show. We tell you how this looks like right now. And there are 5 questions that still remain unanswered. First and foremost, question number 1. Can China afford to escalate this further at a time when Donald Trump is set to meet the Chinese leadership? He's looking to, in fact, visit China over the course of the next couple of months for trade talks. Can China actually afford to topple that apple cart, so to say, right now? Question number 2, how far is Donald Trump willing to go as far as protecting Japan is concerned? It's one thing to have a mutual defense treaty. It's quite another 70 years later to have a president who's unsure of it to actually back this to the hilt. He may, but there are questions that he may not. Third question, where and how long can Taiwan now be on the edge? It wants greater defense guarantees from the US as well. As things stand right now, that isn't the case because Donald Trump and his administration is fairly transactional in its approach. Question 4 that comes in terms of the Russia-China relationship. It's one thing to fly a couple of bombers along with China to send out a message to rattle the Japanese defense radars and send a message to Taiwan. It's quite another to back China in a larger conflict. Is Vladimir Putin willing to do that? And the last question that is most important right now is that can this escalate beyond just the Pacific? And if so, will this engulf the world in yet another conflict? And can it actually happen right now? Well, those are questions that we are going to wait for answers to. Turning attention now to the other story on the show. This is, shifting focus now to Syria. It's been a year since Syria witnessed the fall of an Assad. It took 54 years for it to happen after a swift 11-day assault by al-Shara, whose transition from being one of the most wanted terrorists to now a world leader who's actually met Donald Trump in office. In Oval Office, he had that meeting and addressed Committee of Nations at the United Nations. Yes, all that has happened. But things have been far from perfect. In fact, things haven't looked up so much for the average Syrian who's still battling sectarian violence, chants of death calls to his fellow minority countrymen. This report tells you what all has happened in the last 1 year and why it almost seems like the more things change, the more they remain the same. Take a look.
I come to you from Damascus, the capital of history and the cradle of civilizations, a beautiful country that has taught the world the meaning of civilization and the value of human beings and coexistence. Syria, however, for 60 years fell under a repressive rule that disregarded the value of the territory it ruled over.
This is how much the world has changed in the last year. Al-Shara, the man who took down Bashar al-Assad's government, is no longer most wanted and is now rubbing shoulders with world leaders. Not too long ago, the Trump administration, which hosted Al-Shara at the Oval Office, had a bounty of over $10 million on his head. But Al-Shara is no unifying figure. Syria is a Sunni majority country but has Shiites, Christians, Alawites and Kurds, which are predominantly in the northeast, all of whom are yet to come together as a country. The power transition may have been swift, but not the political transition. Add to it the fact that there has been no transitional justice. Perpetrators of the most heinous crimes committed in Syria are yet to be brought to justice. Whether for those close to the Assad regime or even those on the other side. For most Syrians, life continues to be very challenging. A crippling economy, rebuilding of the nation, a painful process that is yet to begin. Being a key player in the geopolitical chessboard, with all major nations having their own interests, both Saudi Arabia and Turkey have deep interests in Syria and will dictate which way the national will go from here. Bureau Report, NDTV.
Let's now document for you viewers what all has actually happened in the last 1 year. When we say that sectarian violence has engulfed Syria, let's document some of those specific flashpoints for you. First and foremost, in December of last year, tensions with the Kurdish forces actually peaked in northeast part of Syria. This was just weeks into the transition, and you had seen massive flashpoints that took place in the northeast, which is where there's a large chunk of Kurdish population that stays. This year in March, 1,400 Alawites were actually gunned down under Hayate al-Hasham's command. This happened where now Alawites are a very important part of the minority population in Syria and are under attack. In June of this year, there were 25 people who were killed in the Church of St. Elas bombing. Now, this is again the Christians there. It is part of the Greek Orthodox Church where the bombing took place, sent shockwaves around the world. That while Al-Shara, you can try and mainstream him and his government, but you cannot overlook what really is happening in the country. Next up, there was the Israeli bombings that rocked Damascus. As far as Israel is concerned, there is that big fault line with regard to Israel and Syria. That is something that Donald Trump is trying to fix, but there are no easy answers there. In July of this year, hundreds were killed this year when there was the Druze militia and the Sunni Bedouin clashes that took place. This is something that's extremely important to understand why Syria has no quick fixes. In fact, November of this year, Israel attacked Damascus over farmland, and that tells you that sectarian violence is something that has been continuing in the country and something that there are no easy answers to and cannot be overlooked as well. And that's the single important aspect. And which brings us to the blinkers off segment. Viewers, the worst is not over for Syria as yet. Yes, the 14-year-long civil war has come to an end, but there are hundreds, maybe thousands of ISIS sleeper cells that remain in Syria. And the former jihadist leader will have to account for the fact that massive threat comes from over 9,000 ISIS terrorists that were released from prisons. To reconstruct his country, Al-Shara needs Western funding. But back home, minorities are under attack. There is a backlash to not sign the Abraham Accords with Israel. 1 year ago, Syrians were chanting, "Lift your head up, you're a Syrian." Now there are death calls for each other that they're all chanting on their faces. Everyone needs to get over the romantic notion that everything in Syria is now perfect after Bashar al-Assad has gone. That isn't the case. The world needs to recognize that. On that note, a quick break. We return with more and the latest that's happening in the Thai-Cambodia clashes that are far from over. Stay with us. Artillery, rockets and airstrikes are once again echoing across the Thai-Cambodian border. Villages along the corridor, hundreds of kilometers, have now been emptied for the second time in 5 months. Families along with their pets now wait in makeshift shelters, unsure when they can return and anxious that they may have to flee yet again. The renewed fighting comes just months after Trump brokered ceasefire. Donald Trump announced in July. This latest flare-up began with what appeared to be a minor incident on Sunday when a Thai engineering team building an access road in the disputed frontier zone was allegedly fired upon by Cambodian forces. 2 Thai soldiers were hurt, though their injuries were not that serious. Previously, swift diplomacy might have contained such a clash, but this year trust between the two countries and neighbors have eroded completely. A gap even Donald Trump's negotiating efforts have been unable to close. Take a look at this report that tells you why that flashpoint is more than just a couple of discussions in Oval Office that can fix. Take a look.
An old border rivalry in Southeast Asia has erupted into its fiercest fighting in years. Thailand and Cambodia, neighbors locked in a century-old dispute, are once again trading artillery fire along a frontier first mapped by French colonial rulers back in 1907. What began in May as scattered skirmishes turned deadly when a Cambodian soldier was killed. Nationalist anger surged on both sides. Cambodia tightened border controls, even banning Thai media and consumer goods in a show of defiance. A ceasefire brokered in October, with US President Donald Trump stepping in to briefly calm tensions. But that peace didn't last. Landmine blasts and mutual accusations of ceasefire violations shattered the truce, pushing both armies back into combat. Heavy shelling and airstrikes are pounding more than a dozen flashpoints across the border. Each side blames the other. Civilians, on the other hand, are again on the move, fleeing homes caught in the crossfire. A conflict fueled by history, nationalism and political pressure, and no clear path to peace.
That's all we have in this edition of Fault Lines, viewers. Thanks so much for watching. Next week, yet another war zone, yet another conflict decoded right here on Fault Lines.